it's time for the instructional video for week 23. Thanks for joining me. Let's get into all the fun stuff you have this week. For your language objective, we have speaks in increasingly complex sentences using joining words. So again, the best thing to do is to model this for your child. Use complex sentence structures. Don't baby talk to them. Go ahead and talk to them just like you would a friend. Use those complex sentences with clauses and phrases, or read to them from books that have more complex sentence structure. You could read to them maybe from some storybooks or classic books that are designed for, a 3rd or 4th grade reading level. And children love stories that fall right around that reading level. Obviously, they need them to be read to them, but those do model some complex sentence structure, which gets that into their brains. And the more that they hear it, the more likely they are to use it. So you can, one way to elicit these more complex sentences from your child is to ask them to describe something, and then to encourage them to use the word and, for instance. So some common joining words: and, but, or, because. So you can ask them to describe something like, tell me what that dog looks like. And then encourage them to use the word and to continue to add words to it. So your child might say, it's brown. And you could say, oh, it is brown. It's brown, and can you think of something else? And your child might say, it's brown and furry. And in that way, you can help them to continue to make a more complex sentence, to join, adjectives or even entire phrases together. You could ask them to explain an event that happened, and then, prompt them to use the word because to explain why it happened. At the dinner table, you could say, oh, tell your brother what happened at the park today. And as they relate a story, they might say, oh, I fell off the slide or the seesaw or whatever. And you could say, and tell them why that happened, and it happened because, or, could be something good. It could be, oh, I got to pet a dog, or, that happened because, we happened to walk by the dog park, and this woman was coming out with her fluffy brown dog. So using, prompt your child to use because to add on to their story and explain the sequence of events and why certain things happened. And it just helps them to join these different thoughts together into more of a complex sentence structure. For your cognitive objective, we have predicts outcomes. So this is another fun one to do. You can have some conversations and play some games that ask your child to predict what will happen next. So these could be kind of board game type games like Jenga or pick up sticks that really require your child to analyze what's going to happen if they make a certain move. So if they pull out this particular piece, what's going to happen? Is the whole tower going to come tumbling down? And so there's a lot of prediction involved in games like that. You could also just, again, in conversation with your child, again, at the playground, it's another great example. Hey, if you put your stuffed animal on one side of the seesaw and you sit on the other, what do you think is going to happen? And it gets their brain moving, and then they're going to want to try it, and they're going to want to see whether they're right or not. And everything just flows from there as far as that, then you get into sort of a trial and error type situation where they're trying different things and predicting what's going to happen. So that's another great way to get them to work on this skill. For your literacy objectives, we're all the way to the letter W, which can be a little bit tricky. Because W can be a vowel, for instance, when it comes with an O, like in the word bow. And it can also make, so the normal sound of W is just a W sound, but it can also make a little bit of a breathier sound if it's with an H, like in the word what. There's just it's so subtle that sometimes it's very hard to distinguish, but there's, a difference between a W and the sound that it makes by itself, W, versus WH, and the little bit more of a breath sound that you have with that of wha. So feel free to skip those examples when you see them in words and just focus on words that begin or incorporate the main sound of W, wha. And then it's a fun one. It's a fun one to either write or to, trace in sand or things like that to identify the upper and lowercase w as well. Also for literacy objectives this week, we have counting syllables in a word. So this can be a little bit of a tricky skill. It certainly will take longer than a week for your child to probably really master this one. So it's just something you want to start introducing to your child, is the concept of syllables. And so it's very musical. Like, what you can do is you can say, okay, we're going to count the syllables in a word, and by clapping you can determine that. Elephant. So that's obviously 3 syllables, and show your child how by clapping and saying the word you can identify the sounds in it. For some children, the clapping method doesn't seem to work very well. For some of them, it works great. If it doesn't work very well for your child, you can also tell them that robots talk in syllables. So if they speak in a robot voice, then that's going to get them the syllables too. Elephant. And so you could tell them to talk in robot speak to try to identify how many syllables are in a word. So that's another little tip to use. For math objectives, we're going to measure the weight, length, height, and volume of an object or substance. So you don't have to do necessarily all of those. Maybe pick a couple of them that fit into your routine. So maybe in the kitchen, they could be helping you cook, and you could be showing them how to use the measuring cup and measure cups of liquid or cups of flour, things like that. Or you could decide that you want to measure, the length of something. Get out the tape measure or a ruler or the yardstick and work on that one. You don't have to work on every single one. But as you practice this skill and they practice measuring it, and as you guys are talking about what you're doing, then that also works on the second objective, which is understands and uses words comparing length, weight, height, and volume. So as you measure different substances and objects, then you're talking about which one is longer, which one is taller, which one is shorter, which bowl has more or less. And so you're using those comparison words to talk about the things that you're measuring. Continued from week 19, we're going to continue to practice the months of the year. Again, small practice sessions on this of just maybe now a couple times a week, 3 times a week. You don't even have to do this every single day, of just running through the months of the year in order. Or listening to a song. Again, there's lots of videos that are going to have the months of the year that your child could listen to. Also continued from week 22, identifying names and values of the common currencies. So again, this is just a real quick practice session. You just want to make sure you're doing it fairly frequently, of having them identify the names of coins. For fine motor skills, we have 1 pincer grasp activity, 1 wrist extension and stability activity, 1 open thumb web space activity, and 1 gross or cylindrical grasp activity. For social emotional objectives, under the category of relationship skills, we have asks for help from adults and identifies support needed. So for instance, saying that, they need help getting a toy, and asking, specifically, giving you a little bit more detail, instead of just saying help and pointing, you want to try to elicit from them what they actually need. Will you reach that down from the shelf for me, please? So you want them to really describe the help that they're looking for. Will you help me put my shoes on? So just encouraging them to not just, say help and gesture. And, as mom, we already know what our kids need. And there may be a tendency to just go ahead and help them and not do it. But this is encouraging them to specifically use words to describe the help that they need, as they will need to do more often in kindergarten. And under the category of self-awareness, attempts to use skills for daily living. So this is just, sort of helping and supporting and encouraging them to use all these new skills that they're gaining, particularly for this objective, fine motor skills, to do things like brush their own teeth or, pack their own bag, gather up their library books that are due to go back to the library and put them in a book bag, get their own shoes on, things like that. And for your fun project for this week, we're going to start learning name. So the letters in their name and the order that the letters go in. So your child, again, at this age, some children already know their name. Maybe they already know how to write their name, and other children don't, and both of which are completely, developmentally normal and fine. But it is super helpful when your child goes off to kindergarten and you hopefully have everything of theirs labeled, and then maybe their desk or their cubby at school is also going to be labeled with their name, that they do recognize their name and maybe can even spell it. So the project for this week will involve, a fun game with Post-it notes to help your child learn all the letters in their name and the order that they go in, and really practice those early reading skills to recognize their name. So that is it for week 23. We're getting close to the end, so getting close to time for kindergarten. I hope you have fun with it this week, and I'll see you back next week.